I am an elder Zoomer. I have no nostalgia for 90s media. And yet, Planescape Torment, a game older than me, is one of my favorite games of all time, and I want to make a case for why it should be played even now. It has a very unique tale with dialogue so varied in detail it's yet to be matched by any newer title. You play a scarred immortal who forgets all every time he dies. In fact, you start in a morgue having just died. Your character is just as clueless as you, the player. Your previous lives are countless, and they include anything from saintly warriors to tyrannic mages to lost beggars and madmen. You go through the realms searching for who you are and why you are immortal, while constantly seeing the legacies your previous lives have left throughout the whole journey. This random lady on the street was your ex in one life and your murderer in another. Characters talk about past legends and tales, and chances are it'll be about you, like this one. This burning mage was taught by a previous life. This guy was enslaved by a prior version of you. So many more ridiculous examples I could give, and all this in a flying donut city of infinite portals in between all the dimensions. It's a wacky, hot tale to sell, and I don't care at all for Dungeons and Dragons, which this game is based on. You do literally go to hell in this game. But Chris Avallone manages to pull it off. He wrote most of his script, and also the verse parts of New Vegas, which really shows lightning does not strike twice.
Brought the bear, then the bull brought me.
This ridiculous tale and the unique companions you'll see work because of this game's greatest strength, still lauded to this day: writing.
Wow!
That alone made this game a cult classic despite lacking in so many other places. Also, it has a bombastic soundtrack. Writing in this game is convincing, immersive, and gripping unlike any other. It's something to be savored like a good book, constantly checking the next page as you and the protagonist together discover his past. A cliched phrase, but no other RPG has done that for me, not even the classics. The writing has clarity of purpose, characters actually feel like they are their own person rather than just being a set piece, and it helps that the game has some of the most unique and interesting companions ever in a game. Descriptions of places are vivid and colorful and add so much imagination to a game from the 90s that has little visual detail. Even random NPCs have surprising depth and colorful tales to tell. This is all carried by some brilliant dialogue writing, which is often memed about because of the frankly inhuman amount of options. An example, this guy is an apostate servant of the goddess of the city you play in this game. His kind speaks in hieroglyphs that you cannot understand at the beginning, and your companions can translate for you. I believe 4 companions have 4 different interpretations for each of Fail's lines. Who knew one of your past lives? That is already insane. But here's the thing, you can learn that language and still have your companions translate, thus seeing what they think. And one of your companions, Dakon, outright lies in his translation, because he was your companion in your past life as well and does not wish to talk about it. You can confront him over this. It's enthralling in how natural it is. You never realize how utterly lacking that simple aspect of convincing writing is because we've been conditioned to appreciate that mediocrity. I can count on one hand the amount of times I've been moved from a simple conversation in a game. Almost all must have come from Planescape. Everything just clicks, from the most inconsequential of speech, such as those with a random cleric in a bar, a random corpse you talk to after learning to speak to the dead, to the conclusions with antagonists and companions are all lovingly written. The main story itself and the final push of the game is a truly cathartic experience. The tale of the amnesiac immortal is executed and ended brilliantly in a very enriching and complete manner. Talking to your own previous lives, judging you for who you are, is the most interesting intermission I've ever seen in a game. You get some incredible closure and sense of finality with your companions, and the final boss himself has some brilliant dialogue and options. A sense of satisfaction and contentment of having experienced something truly incredible lingers. I'd like to compare it to Baldur's Gate 3. See, these games are cousins. The first 2 Baldur's Gates were made in the same engine as Planescape, shared half a setting and made around the same time. And the third game is lauded as one of the best CRPGs of all time, just like Planescape. In many ways, it should be what Planescape should have been. It has a 2 million word script to Planescape's 800,000, both insane for their times. It has a line for every actual NPC in game, something Planescape can't do. But not even its writing can compare to it. When you look at the 2 gift companions of these games, Lae'zel and Dakon, it becomes obvious. Lae'zel force feeds you how alien she is with made up words. Dakon uses idioms of his people's past which he is happy to explain. Hey, Lae'zel has little to tell beyond her loyalty to her queen and being an asshole, plus a mediocre arc about learning how to be normal. Dakon has an entire religion he's happy to teach, and you can learn and discuss with him. You can unmake her loyalty to the queen that defines Lae'zel with a literal dice roll, whereas for Dakon, change comes from reading and understanding his religion. Chapter by chapter that actually exists exists as written content and learning his doubts and how he was enslaved by a previous life of yours. When you compare the two, that con has a sense of completeness, a profound sense of being that Lae'zel lacks, because she's a product of writing by committee and not direction. Baldur's Gate 3 still has great writing for the standards of video games, especially some lines are brilliant, but it definitely lacks the sense of direction and sheer consistency that Planescape has, and its brilliance is not a constant given. For every 20 forgettable unique NPCs Baldur's Gate 3 has, Planescape has one intricate encounter, even if with less lines. This is also why linear games tend to have better stories, much easier to have purposeful writing when you don't have options like an RPG. Planescape simply excels in all of this, and it's why not even modern exemplars like BG3 can compare. But there is a reason why Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 influenced RPGs for years to come, but this did not. This game is often called a visual novel and is mostly justified. It barely qualifies as a video game. The actual game aspect of Planescape as in the combat is utterly unfinished and nigh unplayable, practically an afterthought. It's a turn-based RPG without turns, and fights often turn into meaningless slugfests with you pausing in the middle to cast spells. You even see how little care went into it in your equipment, as there is very little on options, or at least the care went into the wrong details. Stuff like spells working opposite in chaotic realms is very cool and all, and exactly the sort of fridge brilliance you'd expect from Planescape, but it does not make for fun fights. Hell, even the sole good parts of the combat, the very flashy Final Fantasy-esque mega spells, are just for fluff, but they are cool. You don't want to use them because they take too long and make you suffer the combat that much longer. You can play Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 if you want to see how Planescape combat should have been. Another lacking aspect is that despite all I've said, some of the companions simply don't have enough lines outside scripted scenes during quests like what's on the screen. Vaylor, for example, voiced by Keith David,
I am Vaylor.
an undead spirit who worships justice and law. Beyond his recruitment, the guy has nothing new for the rest of the game, other than some funny tidbits like murdering people randomly. I know that this is due to the 90s, different priorities back then, and everyone simply had less words, but it does hurt the game. I mentioned that Planescape does more with less, but BG3's more than double the length script does not hurt it in feeling immersive either. I do like how everyone comments on things you do, and I wish Planescape had that, but you know, it was 1999. Honestly, if Larian had remade this game instead of a sequel to Baldur's Gate, and got Avalon to fill in the empty spaces, it could be the literal holy grail perfect RPG. That's how good it is. But it will never happen, and its sole spiritual successor is a shit game. I will always find it funny how the same developers released the titanic New Vegas, but also the very mediocre Outer Worlds. Direction really is a fickle mistress. I'm not one for nostalgia. I would not recommend Fallout 2 for people my age, for example, because it's not all that special in today's age. It doesn't offer anything new, even though I love that game and finished it twice. But Planescape, despite its age, despite many flawed aspects, despite terrible gameplay, despite all this and more, somehow still has the most brilliant story I've ever played, and still deserves to be experienced today. There's still nothing quite like it, and in a way, I suppose that's sad.
I have paid for your life with mine. The debt is settled.